Hi everyone, this video is all about the demonstration of the project which you can see right out here goes by the name BlockVote, which basically means voting system using the blockchain. So let's get into the agenda. First we will be discussing what a blockchain is, what is the architecture, what are the requirements and how does it differ from the normal database. Next we will be looking into the project workflow and followed by a quick hands-on. Followed by that, we will be giving about the advantages, insights, and a good discussion about using the blockchain. And then we will be concluding it with a good note. So, yeah, without any further ado, let's get started. So, there are 3 points which I have described right out here. I feel these 3 are the important points to summarize what a blockchain is. So, the first point says a blockchain is a decentralized, distributed, and oftentimes public digital ledger consisting of records called blocks. So yeah, so the most important word right out here is decentralized and distributed, and the words blocks is too. So blockchain is basically the same kind of database, but it is decentralized, which means in a centralized architecture what we had is a central server and different clients connected to it. If the server goes down, the clients face a downtime, and if the records or the information stored in the database in the central server somehow gets corrupted, so you don't have a way back in time to fix it. Yeah, backups might be helpful, but yeah, we still had to fix the database. Next thing we see out here is public digital ledger consisting of records called blocks. I'll be discussing about this in the next slides. Next is it is used to record transactions across many computers so that any involved block cannot be altered. As I said, blockchain is basically a decentralized ledger, which means that suppose 10 computers are connected to the blockchain network, and the information in the 10 computers have to be the information at same level. It doesn't mean that the computer 1 is holding 9 transactions and computer 2 is holding 10 transactions. Then we don't create a blockchain like that. Like, it has to be information at same level. Every block in the every node in the blockchain must have the same kind of information. Next, it says that it has been described as a value exchange protocol, and it can maintain title rights too. So in the further slides I will be discussing about the features, which means that a blockchain is a tamper proof. Why? Because I will be saying also in the next slide. For that reason we can kind of use it as a title rights database. Suppose I own something and I record that transaction into the blockchain, and now someone or the other claims that my property is their property. Now they has to show it, right? Like they has to alter it in the blockchain, but altering information in the blockchain is not feasible and kind of near to impossible. So this is also a good application of using blockchain. So yeah, there's a famous quote by Chris Dixon which goes by this saying, there are 3 eras of currency: commodity based, politically based, and now math based. So we are now dealing with the math based currency. So yeah, what exactly is a blockchain? So before diving deep into the blockchain part, let us discuss centralized ledger and distributed ledger once again in a much more minute manner. So suppose there is a bank. Right out here you can see there's a bank, and this bank is basically the central server in a digital world. So there are various branches. Suppose 4 branches are out there for this bank, and me as a customer, I approach this bank right out here saying that I want to withdraw suppose 500 rupees. So what it does is that first it checks my status, that how much money do I have in my account, do I have the sufficient amount to withdraw. So that request is sent to the centralized server, it gets performed and request back, it gives a response. So I had suppose like around 1000 rupees and I wanted to withdraw 500 rupees, and they check and they say that yeah, I have sufficient amount of balance. So yeah, you are allowed to perform this transaction. So I do the transaction and I move out of the scenario. So now what happens, when I move out is basically now the this branch has to update this information that I have withdrawn, and again it will be stored in the central server. And now the central server, as it is connected to the other branch, will also like be responsible to show in the other branches too. Suppose I am in the same city and I just travel right out here in this branch, and I say that I want to withdraw 1,000 rupees, but now he knows that okay, let me check your balance, and he checks and it says that I have 500 rupees, so I can't perform this. So obviously it's a good thing, but let us talk about the cons about it. What if the central server gets down, like you all face in the banks, right, that link is not available, server failure, so that's basically the issue out here. So now I am stuck, so I'm basically not able to withdraw any money out of any branch. Why? Because like if the central server is down, I can't withdraw at all. So that's basically a disadvantage. And also the if the information is somehow hacked in the central server, the whole branches, I mean all branches will be like getting the same information. What if me as a customer, I'm a malicious hacker, and I hack into the central server saying that I have 1 lakh rupees, which means that I did a fraud. So I am having 1 lakh rupees, I can like withdraw any amount of money less than that, but I didn't have any 1 lakh rupee in my account. I had like around 1,000 rupees. So now, but no one can deny, because like everybody is connected to this central architecture, so there's no point in denying, so they have to accept it. So this is basically the whole issue about using the centralized ledger. There is a single point of entity. First, if it gets broken, then we face a downtime, a major issue in that, and if it get hacked, there's also a major issue in that. So let us talk about the distributed architecture right now. The same scenario which you see as a centralized server or a centralized ledger is now shifted to the distributed one. So these are all nodes, which are the branches you can see out here. So these branches right out here is basically the same branch which I talked about at the beginning about this bank. So suppose I wanted to withdraw the same, I kind of go into the same scenario which I say to this branch requesting that I wanted to withdraw 500 rupees from my account. Please like initiate my transaction. So the like the flow will be same, so there isn't any differences like okay, hold on, I'm just giving you right now. No, the flow has to be the same, otherwise the economy will be corrupted. So yeah, so the now the as a customer I say him that okay, give me 500 rupees from my account. So this information which I said right now to this branch will be broadcasted to all the branches. In the first scenario, all the branches didn't have that access, like only this branch is interacting with the server, so no branches are knowing that I'm basically doing a transaction or requesting for a transaction. Only the communication is stored between this centralized server and this branch. But in this distributed one, every branch is knowing that I am trying to like initiate a transaction request. So now everyone wants to check that I have the sufficient balance or not. Do I have it? Yes, I have 1,000 rupees in my account. So all the branches or the majority of the branches say yes, I have, so please give me my 500 rupees. So they like says yes to my request, and they give me my 500 rupees, and again I move out from my scenario. Now what happens after when I move out? So the transaction is completed, which means the branch or the node which I wanted to interact with has the information that I transacted, and this thing will be broadcasted to all the nodes or all the branches in this ledger. It's not that it is sending to only one branch or only one node as it happened out here. If it fails, then it fails. No, but there is no kind of failing out here or kind of misuses out here. Why? Because if suppose this fails, we have this 3. If this fails, we have this 3. If all fails, which is really unlikely, we don't have anything, but yeah, we still will be having, as when I follow this distributed thing, I am also kind of part of the blockchain or kind of part of that architecture. So I am also a customer in that network, so information can also be retrieved from me. Yeah, so this was basically the differences between centralized and distributed ledger. let us move on to the details about the blockchain. Before that, let us also talk about the transaction, how it happened in a more concise way, which I talked earlier. So users initiate transaction using their digital signature, which basically means that I just say, okay, this is my account, please, I'm giving you my authentication, please check that whether I have the sufficient balance or not. And that information users broadcast the transactions to node, which means that transaction doesn't mean that it has to be a withdrawal or deposit. It has to be information. Is it correct? Is it right? So it has to be validated, right? So for validation, a single node can't take it in a distributed ledger. So it like broadcasts all the information in the all the nodes. Then one or more nodes begin validating its transaction. As I said also, that all the nodes or majority of the nodes, if they say yes, then I am okay with it, which means nodes aggregated transaction into the block. So block is basically kind of like information stored in a block, which means a node is holding some information regarding transaction, what is the ID and all, which I'll be discussing in the later slides. So this is basically the flow chart till here. Then after I do the transaction, now I move out. Now the nodes will broadcast the blocks to each other. So I done the transaction, and now they will like share all the information in this manner. Consensus protocol is used, which basically means that the nodes right out here, as they don't have any centralized server or somehow like compared to the real world like a leader or a manager, they don't have anything like that. So they have to follow some kind of protocol to come to a point to say it is valid, am I right, am I wrong. So some kind of consensus protocol is used to basically mine or to store the information in the blockchain. And after it is done, then block reflecting the true state is chained to prior block. It means that remember I initiated a transaction or a withdrawal request in this branch. So this branch will be responsible of generating a block, not these branches. Why? Because they just checked, they just did their part of checking and validating, not of creating a transaction. So this node will basically create a block or the block of information, and it will basically link to the blockchain. So now let us look what basically a blockchain looks like. So this is a simple diagram right now you see in front of your screen. The first block in the blockchain is called as genesis block, and later the blocks are linked one after the other in a linear manner. So before I discuss about this hash and previous hash, let me say what are the three components or three important parameters in a single block. First being the data. So data can be about anything. It might be a normal information or a transaction. Next is a hash. Hash is basically the unique ID of a block, right? Because suppose if I say in a simple manner that this is my first block, second block, third block, okay, it's like easy and feasible to understand right now. But what if there are like 1 crore block? Obviously we won't be indexing with the simple counter variable. We have to use some kind of mechanism to identify that this is my block or this is the block which basically creates the request or validates, etc., etc. So that is done using the hash. So hash basically depends on the data. Why? Because if I say like hash is just a normal number or a big number, it might be some kind of feasible. What if someone hacks into the blockchain and changes the hash and says this is my block, I was assigned to this number, so it will be a huge chaos. So for that we keep a dependency on the data to create the hash. So now let us look at the hash like so there is a website you can check out here, and I type something like hello. So for this string hello I get this hash. It is unique. So when I type hello again, I'll be getting the same kind of hash only. There's no differences. But what amazes is that I changed the hello to a space afterwards. So mind it that I just kept a hello with no space. I basically typed hello and I given a space after that. You can check out here. I have given a space. So for that space, a lot amount of arbitrary information is added now. So the first hash was having some kind of 185f, and now we have some other different hash. So you can check that there's a lot of entropy out here. So for that reason, we basically did this, the dependency on the data for the hash. And the third parameter, as you have guessed correctly, is the previous hash, because like how will I decide that which block will get assigned to which block? So it has to create a dependency also between the blocks. So now this diagram will be crystal clear to all of you. The first block is holding some kind of data. Suppose let us assume the data 1 only. So for the data 1, this hash is generated, and as there is no block assigned to this, so previous hash is basically kept as a 0 or a null, but it's nothing, it's blank. Now suppose the next block is added, but to be added, as I said, that if suppose 2 wants to get added to 1, then this block's hash has to be the part of the second block. So you can check this hash is become now previous hash of this block, and 2 for 2 I get this hash. In same way, the blocks are appended and a blockchain is created, and you can check out here the hash previous hash hash previous hash kind of follows the diagonal manner. So in this way the whole blockchain is created and the transactions are done. But what if someone tries to hack? Now let us look into it. So the same diagram which you see right out here is same out here too, but the second block which you see right out here is holding some kind of other data, and as I said that the hash also depends upon the data. So if I change the data, it means I have changed the whole hash, right? So for that what I do is now that I get a different hash right out here, but I am connected with the blockchain, so there is block after me previously to me, so I am kind of trapped. So if I change the hash, I also have to change the hash of the third block, I mean the previous previous hash. So previous hash is also basically a data you are trying to tamper. So for that reason also the hash will of this block will get tampered, and again the link will be get broken. So you can check out it that there follows a pattern. If I change the data, the hash gets changes, and if the hash gets changes, I also have to manipulate other blocks. So it basically kinds of follows the dominoes pattern. So it kind of goes on and on and on, and it isn't feasible. Why? Because if I hack it, fine, I hacked it, but what if the transaction cost is too high? I kept the transaction cost too high to change the information. So that's kind of some kind of economic feasible architecture. So that's why we really can't tamper any data once when it is stored in blockchain, and we also will be discussing about the limitation. But before that, let's look at the project workflow. So a country holds an election and wants to prevent voter fraud. So what they do is they create a commission or autonomous organization who is basically responsible to create the election and also to prevent any tampering of the votes. So they create a contract which is basically a digital one, and that contract will assign few users with a token. So user is basically us who are voting, who are responsible to vote. So we are issued with some tokens, and people with tokens will start voting. And as I said, that voting is basically a data or transaction, what you say, and every vote is recorded in the blockchain out here. And this project uses the Ethereum blockchain, which we will be seeing in a few minutes. So yeah, this is the overall workflow. So I guess it's time for quick hands-on. So let's look at the project. So let us look at the components first. I said country holds the organization, a smart contract will be created and it will be stored in the blockchain. So let us look at the blockchain first. So here you can check out, here is the blockchain, where this is the address, and balance, transaction count, index, details. We will be talking about this. Before that, let us basically run the application. So yeah, so the contract is out here in my directory, so I'll try to compile the contract. Yeah, you can check, see the transactions are happening. See, it cost me some kind of ether to also replace the contract, or also to like upgrade the contract. You can check that there's a delay out here, which basically means that I am facing some kind of either network issue or the transactions are getting mined. So it takes time because like the block has to be found, validated, and then deployed in the blockchain. I guess there's some kind of issue. Okay, yeah, it's done. Okay, so yeah, so it's now time to run the application. I have my server running out here, so I'll just open up. It's in 3000. First time it sometimes take time to load, so we'll just wait till it gets loaded. And you can I don't know if you noticed or not, but the first address is basically assumed as the contract owner, or as I said right out here, the DAO or the autonomous organization. The balance is debited. Everybody has 100 ethers, but this account has some kind of 99 point ETH transaction. So I'll just show you quickly the transactions also. So you can check contract creation transaction is done. As I said, that everything when you want to write on the blockchain, you have to create a transaction. Reading from it doesn't creates any debited of balance. So you can check, this is my data out here. All the contract data is in the hexadecimal format, and a hash is there, and this is the contract call. Like I have completed my contract completion. So let us move on to the, okay, it's still loading. I guess it's loaded. Yeah, so this is the welcome page. Let us directly move on to the cast vote, which is the main thing which I want to show you. And you can check this candidate name. It's basically in the smart contract, and which I'll be showing you in later part. So you can see these are all candidate name, vote 0 because no one has voted for it, and also the party out here. So what I'll do is now is basically let me go into the slide and say, yeah, this point, voting tokens are issued to everybody eligible to vote. So everyone in this blockchain is kind of eligible to vote. So me being the smart contract owner, or the election commission is also eligible to vote. But let me kind of show you the user. So suppose these are all the users out here. So how they will import their wallet and vote. Let us consider the last user. So you can see this is my account address. As I said, that blockchain doesn't gives any information about a name and all, because everybody is like having only a public key and a private key. So I'll just copy this private key, and I'll click on the MetaMask extension. Okay, so it's a different account. I'll just import the account. Let's import by pasting the private key. Okay, so you can check, let me cross verify. So this is my 0xe3d, and yeah, it's the same. So I'll just choose Nota and click on vote. Okay, so something strange happens, and it kinds of like shocked, like what is this? So let us move on to the slide again, and you can check people start voting. So we are in the voting phase now. So what is this now? As I said, that when I vote or when I do something, I'm actually writing in the blockchain, and for writing in the blockchain I have to spend some kind of token. What is this token? Remember I said in this slide that voting tokens are issued everybody to everybody eligible to vote. So these are the tokens. So it basically costs 0, but yeah, it's some kinds of cost to me, right? So 0.001 and all. So I'll just confirm, and it gives me a prompt, thanks for voting. Okay, and you can check that 1 is showcased in the Nota part, and you have already voted. So whatever I do, I can't like vote again. So make sure that we select the correct candidate to vote. So this was the overall demo about the project. Let us show you the smart contract which I promised. So I'll just click on the contracts and this election file. So I'll just open up. Yeah, right out here, constructor. So we see add candidate function, the candidate name and the party. So in this way we add the details are right out here, and this is a function which is responsible for candidate count and the votes, party and all, and this is the voting function. So I hope you like this video. Make sure that you understood it. So let us discuss into the next part, the insights, like what we learned from this project. Advantages: first is the cost cutting. Like basically see that there is a bare and minimal kind of physical access being done. Yeah, I assume that there kind of can be malicious activity, but let us just be idle for some time and just say that yeah, cost cutting. So it's a huge cost cutting rather than the EVM voting or the ballot voting. Next, tamper proof voting. Remember I said you that a blockchain is not tamperable. So yeah, so once I stored the information in the blockchain, I can't change it. Next is transparent voting. So it basically means that um, I can see that yeah, I have voted. Right? As a client, I can see it. Suppose so if someone gets eager, like did I really vote, or is it like happen, or it was destined to happen? No, you really vote. How am I saying that? Let's go into the transaction. Remember that I can't see this. Why? Because I mean, as a voter in the public world, I can't see this because I'm not having the blockchain access. Only the contract owner will be having the blockchain access. So this is my transaction, most probably. Yeah, so you can check this was my address, and this is basically the contract address. Everybody has an address. I use a gas. Gas is basically a transaction amount or commission, whatever you say, to basically validate or the transaction to be written. So these are all the blockchain details. So let us go right out here. You can see input 6. What does it mean? Let us go back into the block. See, 6. I said you right in this contract. Where do I? Yeah, candidates count plus plus. So candidate count. So I'm using this index method to store, like to refer which candidate or for which party did I vote. So I given input 6, and you can see a event is generated. So let me also show you that. So you can see out here candidate ID 6. So this input and the candidate ID is basically the same. So it's not tamper proof, or nobody did anything behind the blockchain. So yeah, let's discuss once again. Transparent voting, I showed you that. Lesser manpower, because I don't think that as there is any physical access being done right out here, hefty machines haven't to be to be transported. So yeah, lesser manpower and a faster process is the central thing or the central advantage. Everything can be done overnight if someone wants to, but yeah, there might be some limitations, or it all depends on the smart contract, because if that is some kind of malicious, then whole application will collapse. So these are all the advantages. So let's conclude it. As I said, also I'll just say it in more details. There is no choice of there is no chance of illegal vote tampering, as I showed you, because I have to spend some kind of token. Due to transparency of system, the redundancy and duplicacy is avoided, which I also shown you. The time to conduct an election and declaring the results corresponding to it is narrowed down. This is also an important point, I feel, because as there is no like transportation of any machines, EVM or ballot, we don't have to count it manually. Everything can be done automatically, and as it is directly or on the go, it is storing the vote information in the blockchain. Sorry for that. There is no problem in that. So the time to conduct an election and also the result declaration is narrowed down. So yeah, so what are the resources you have to consult before kind of diving into it? I will suggest you read the Bitcoin white paper and also the Ethereum white paper. Bitcoin being the father of the all cryptocurrency, you have to like some kind of read it and understand. And Ethereum is basically what I used in this blockchain. So yeah, thank you for that. I hope you like this video. make sure that you kind of implement yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.